Welcome, everybody. It's great to have you all here. I'm Campbell Brown. I lead the Global News Partnerships team at Facebook. I first want to just say a huge thank you to the Paley Center for hosting this. You guys have been amazing. And to all the Paley board members who came out as well to support this. We are proud to support the Paley Center, the work you do. It's so great for journalism. So we're very appreciative. Thank you, Maureen. So in my role at Facebook, I have had the privilege of paying close attention, as I'm sure many of you have, to the ongoing conversation between Robert Thomson and Mark Zuckerberg, intense debate at times, about the role of the platforms in the news ecosystem and the future of journalism. And that is a lot of what they're going to talk about here today. We have about 45 minutes for the conversation, and we'll save some time at the end to take a few questions. So with that, let me welcome Mark and Robert.
We don't come out for a single round of applause.
All right. Well, I'm very excited about this. So I'm excited to have a chance to talk about the work that we've been doing for a bunch of years now. I mean, it's we've probably been talking about doing this for 3 or 4 years. And basically, the conversations that we've had have helped educate me on the parts of the business model that are really important in the news industry, what it would need to look like for us to do something. It hasn't just been our conversations, conversations with Marty at the Post, with Jonah at BuzzFeed, and a lot of other folks over the years have helped shape my thinking on this. But just to give maybe a few minutes up front on kind of from my perspective why I think this is important in the journey to have gotten here.
I do have one question. What took you so long?
After the last few years, I now have an appreciation that is the nicest thing he could have said. Because that means that he thinks that we actually did something good. As a journalist, you only ask what took so long when you actually have some agreement with what the thing is. Otherwise, the question would have been immediately diving into why are you still getting all this stuff wrong? So I will take that as a compliment. I've believed for a long time, it's very clear that the work that you all do in the news industry and journalism is obviously critical for democracy. I care about giving people a voice so that people can share their own experiences, so that they can share their opinions on things. But at the end of the day, in order for that to be valuable, there needs to be a strong and free press and people actually going and doing the work of uncovering the truth, right? And the important stories that people have kind of the basis and the ground truth to talk about, right, and debate and have that at scale. So it's no secret that the internet has really disrupted the news business model. And I just think that every internet platform has a responsibility to try to help fund and form partnerships to support news. Now, the thing that's been really challenging, that has made this take longer than I think either of us would have wanted, is that we've had this funny dynamic in our community where people come to Facebook and our services because it's a social network. They want to stay connected with their friends and their family and communities, and we get consistent feedback from the vast majority of people on our services that they want to see more content from friends and family and less other stuff. So it's created this odd dynamic where, on the one hand, we personally and kind of the values of our company, we really value journalism. Certainly, we've had a lot of conversations with folks who have pushed us quite hard to kind of show more of the content, to enter into relationships where we can fund more of the content creation. But it just was this kind of odd dilemma where while we wanted to do that, we were just getting consistent feedback from our community that they generally want to see more from friends and family and less of other stuff. So that kind of created an odd dynamic to then be setting up a relationship where we'd be going and paying for content that people were saying that they actually wanted to see something else instead. So the thing that's changed in the last few years is that we've gotten these secondary tabs to work, right? So for the longest time, Newsfeed was basically synonymous with Facebook. That's kind of what the experience was. And I wasn't sure if we were going to be able to build other tabs or other experiences within the app that could get meaningful engagement. And what we found now is, we've built the marketplace tabs that people can go and buy and sell things. We built the watch tabs so people could watch videos. And it took a little while to get these things off the ground. In the beginning, it wasn't clear that they were going to be successful. And still today, the majority of people don't use them. But what we found is that even if 10 or 20% of people in our community really want a dedicated experience in an area, that can still be something that tens of millions of people in the US use and hundreds of millions of people around the world, and that certainly can be quite meaningful and worth doing. So that's what we've been working on, basically, is working on a dedicated tab for journalism, high-quality journalism, in Facebook. And this is going to be the first time ever that there is a dedicated space in the app that's focused on high-quality journalism in order to help curate the top things that are in there. We're not only doing it algorithmically, we're also, we've put together a team of folks who have experience in journalism and a background in this. Because I don't think it's something that can just be done by computers. Of course, we have personalization as well in there, but at least for the top stuff, that's going to be done by people with a background in the space. Provenance, which I'm sure we'll get to, is just an incredibly important thing that you've pushed me on for a while. And then, of course, on a financial basis, this is going to be the first time that we're forming long-term, stable relationships and partnerships with a lot of publishers. And I know we've done a lot of experiments and tried different things in the past, and I know, frankly, that's also created a lot of thrash in the ecosystem when we tried something and it didn't end up working out the way we wanted. That's one of the reasons I wanted to wait until we could prove that we could get these other tabs to work before trying to do this in news, because I wanted to make sure that this could be a positive experience and one that we could commit to for the long term. So now, for the first time, we're making multi-year financial commitments and hopefully helping to make a kind of long-term sustainable business model in a way that we can be in business together. So that's kind of been the journey that we've been on. I'm really excited about this. I'm curious from your perspective. I mean, you've been on this journey with us and in your business as well. I'm curious kind of what it's, what you've seen, what this journey has been like from your perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Mark's had quite a week, and normally the...
this is like by far the best thing I get to do.
I was about to say, normally the amuse-bouche comes at the start of the meal, but... So first of all, look, a short soliloquy from me, and then we get to interrogate each other. But it is a pleasure to be here with Mark to announce a partnership, not just with us, but with many media companies, and a platform that actually is significant for the future of journalism. Look, as many of you know, News Corp has been rather outspoken in the quest for a premium for premium journalism. Obviously, as a media company, we have a vested interest in that cause. But it is also a cause with a social purpose, which is to protect and enhance professional journalism and the profound social role that it plays in this country and far beyond. As an executive, I've been able to make the case persistently and puckishly because of the enduring support of Rupert and Lachlan Murdoch. There were risks involved. I remember a conversation a couple of years ago with a media executive who said that he very much agreed with our content critique, but was, quote, standing behind a very large rock with a pair of binoculars to see what happens to you. The perceived potential punishment would be that an algorithm...
That was not me.
That was not you. It was... No, you have to come and see me later and I'll tell you. The perceived potential partnership or punishment would be that an algorithm would make your journalism disappear, or that it simply wasn't worth the digital distress of agonising powerful players. Now, it's obviously been a difficult decade for journalism. Pew estimates that the number of journalists working at US newspaper mastheads has fallen 47% during the past 10 years. Digital news startups have struggled to survive, let alone thrive, in a dysfunctional landscape that, for example, with First Click Free, actually punished premium journalism. A little corporate contemplation is also appropriate. Publishers and journalists are definitely not absolved from responsibility and need to be held to account for flawed strategies. Some have been too tardy in understanding that how readers read and when they read has fundamentally changed and is still evolving. We have to develop a coherent teleology of technology. But the landscape itself must change. And that was an imperative for us, and that is what makes the Facebook announcement so significant. It is a powerful precedent that will echo around editorial departments. Of itself, it begins to change the terms of trade for quality journalism, both in establishing the principle of payment and in allowing news organisations a clearer opportunity to generate advertising revenue on their terms. In the past, clickbait became the king of content, and egregious aggregation was the norm. Premium content had been commodified, and the hierarchy of journalistic excellence was torn asunder. Mark deserves genuine credit for this digital Damascene moment. There has been a bit of banter between our companies.
Just a little.
We've had occasional disagreements, a little content contretemps. But he has been consistently thoughtful on the subject of journalism. His individual introspection has obviously been a catalyst for an institutional response. Great journalism not only enhances the internet, it is crucial for the functioning of society, for the protection of rights and for public accountability. Great journalism will only be sustainable at scale if there is a fundamental change in the digital ecosystem. This announcement is an important step on the road. It's far from the end of the journey, but is certainly a moment to ponder and recognise.
All right. Well, so
we're pondering.
I agree. Maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the specific points that you've really focused on and pushed me on over the years. I mean, provenance has been one of the key things that I think we've talked about for years, right? The importance of people being able to know where the information is coming from, so that they can establish that base of trust. I mean, I'm curious to hear how you would describe this, after all the conversations we've had.
Well, provenance. Mark, unfortunately, some digital executives seem to think provenance is a region in southern France. Not you, obviously, but and protecting and projecting provenance is a crucial part of ensuring the future of journalism. The news landscape is a little lunar at the moment, and not just for traditional newspapers. And a couple of examples. Digital startups, which don't have the traditional fixed costs, are also on life support, the lucky ones. Verizon Media Group both took a $4.6 billion write-down. The Univision properties are being tossed out of the boat. Quality sites like Quartz apparently generate far more losses than they do revenues. And even clever curated UGC like Fansided is down 5 goals to 0 at half-time. So we can ruminate on the remains, but it's important that there be fundamental changes. And one of the issues is that this has been obvious for such a long time. Back in 2007, when I was the editor of The Times, and it certainly at that time had absolutely nothing to do with Facebook, I was asked to give evidence to a House of Lords committee, and I'm not pretentious enough to claim prescience, and my observations were simply based on perceptions from my day-to-day role as an editor. And I'll read you some of the evidence that I gave to the august Lords. Facts are incidental, if not accidental, on the internet. And the problem we have as a society is that there is a significant number of people who have grown up in a different information environment, surrounded by much more information, but whose provenance is not clear. The rumours will be believed, the fiction will be thought as fact, and the political agendas, among other agendas, will be influenced by interest groups who are coming from some quite strange trajectory to issues based on collective understanding that is founded on falsity. And that's still an issue for us today. And that's why what Facebook is doing is so profoundly important. And it's interesting, at least for us, to get a sense of the debate that went on with your team about how to get to this point in history.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think going back and forth on, I think it has taken us a while to get an appreciation for what the right ways are to support high-quality journalism. For the first decade of the company, most of the efforts that we had were focused on newsfeed itself, right? Which it makes sense. I mean, that's the main kind of way that people use the service. And there, I think we have some levers, right? I mean, we worked on things like instant articles, where we could help serve ads that can be quite effective. We worked on a number of subscription tools to help different publishers grow subscriptions. Our approach in this has always been, by the way, to in all these subscription type tools to make sure that publishers get all the revenue, right? We don't take a cut. We're extending that to the work that we're doing on Facebook News now, which I know is different from some of the other policies that other tech platforms have. But again, our approach here is we think that this is content that people want to see, so it makes our services better, so we benefit that way. And we want as much of the revenue as possible that gets generated to go to publishers to help fund high-quality journalism. So that's not something that we feel like we should be taking a cut of. So we've been working on that for a while. But the fundamental architecture in newsfeed made it a little hard to do a lot more than that, right? It's fundamentally all the content that's in newsfeed is coming from people that you've either said that you want to be friends with or pages that you follow. So there hasn't been a lot of kind of discretionary space in there to put in other content that we just think might be high quality. That's not kind of the logic of how the product works. And then, of course, there's this issue that I was talking about before around the general feedback that we get from our community on wanting to make sure that Facebook and Instagram stay social services first and foremost. I mean, there's a lot of places that people can go to get different kinds of content, but there aren't that many places online that you can go to see what's going on with your community and your friends. And that's the feedback that we've gotten. So now the fact that we've now kind of have more confidence that we can build up tabs outside of newsfeed, and even if it's not going to have billions of people using it, if we can get to 20 or 30 million people in the U.S. using it over years, right? It's going to take a while. This is going to start very small, but I do think that if we continue the partnership and we continue hopefully doing a good job of listening to the ideas and the concerns that folks raised to us, then I think we can probably get to maybe 20 or 30 million people over a few years, even if it starts small initially. That by itself would be very meaningful. So I think it's all of these lessons that we've basically. It's I can understand why to some degree it would be frustrating that it took us a while, but it's I think over time the conversations we basically were able to internalize more of what mattered. And then when the opportunity presented itself, when we had confidence that we could deliver and build a tab that we think could be long-term sustainable, we'd built enough of a shared understanding of what would need to go into that to hopefully make it work, that we at least felt comfortable making long-term, multi-year commitments to be on this journey together and to pay for the content to do that.
Mark, I know the communities are important. Essentially, they're the basis for Facebook, depending on how you define community. And one of the issues that obviously affects a lot of regions in the States is that their community papers are struggling. So can you do something, can you frankly pay local papers as well for their content? Because even Warren Buffett, who thought he was buying at the low and would somehow revive local papers, found the challenge beyond him. And it was beyond him because the economics are not working. The economics not working on the subscription side, and the economics in the open advertising market are dysfunctional.
Yeah.
So what can be done for local papers?
Yeah. So I agree. I think that this is an incredibly important area. And when I was talking before about the disruption from the internet, I think in a lot of ways local papers have probably been hit the hardest. So there are a number of things that we're trying to do here. For a lot of the metro areas around the U.S., we have formed long-term financial partnerships around this news tab, and we're going to include that content. We also, one of the other products that we're working on is we are also building the separate tab that we call Today In, which is basically you can go to it and you can see all of the different content that's happening on Facebook in your local town or in your region. And it's not just news, it's communities that people have formed, it's events that people have on Facebook events, it's posts that people are putting out. It's if the local police department has a page, or there are pages from different civic institutions, then we'll include content from there that's getting some engagement. And this is another product that is it's early, but it's going quite well, and certainly including local news in there and forming a financial partnership around that is one of the things that we hope to do. And then as a third thing, earlier in this year, we also announced a $300 million commitment to journalism and helping a number of publishers, but a special focus on local news to grow their subscription business model especially, and to do work on that. So I don't pretend that any of these steps by themselves are going to be enough. I don't think that we as one company are going to be able to solve this issue. I think that this is by working together. My hope is that the conversations that we've had and that I've had with others hopefully just help advance a model that can be more broadly replicated across the industry, and that as we build products, whether it's Facebook News or Today In, as they scale, we'll be able to increase our financial investment over time, and hopefully others will kind of follow the model that we're helping to set up. And I think that with all of that together, then I think we have a shot. But this is certainly a big problem. I do think local news has been hit particularly hard by all these changes, and in a lot of ways, it's some of the most important content for kind of holding our society and democracy together.
And just over a year and a half ago, the Facebook exec team came to News Corp.
Yeah.
Spoke with Rupert, saw what HarperCollins does with books, what the opinion journal editors do, what the news journal editors do, and the distinction was very clear between church and state at the Wall Street Journal. How much of an impression did that experience have, not only on you, but the members of your team?
I think it was pretty profound. So, every year, I try to take our management team to a company that we admire that does something quite different from us, so that we can just immerse ourselves and learn. And this was, what was it, 2 years ago? Maybe 3 years ago?
November 2017.
Yeah, okay. So, a couple of years ago. And you guys set up just a wonderful day where we basically got a sense of all of the different businesses that are part of News Corp and Fox. And the point that you were saying was one of the ones that really stuck with me, is like internally at your organizations, such a clear distinction between news and editorial, and or news and opinion. And one of the takeaways for me, though, is as someone who sometimes watches TV, but probably not as much as maybe I should, or maybe the right amount. I don't know.
I think you should read more newspapers.
Yeah, well, that's it's as a consumer of this stuff, it's sometimes the stuff blends together, and even despite how rigorous I think your organization and others are at making sure that they are kept separate. And that really crystallized for me that there are a number of things in running Facebook that we think are completely different, and that we have different processes, that internally it's like these things definitely seem like they should be, like they're completely different. And whether it's our policies around ads versus our policies on organic content that people post, it's like, oh, those are handled by completely different parts of the organization. Obviously, they're very different. No, I just think a lot of times the stuff blends together. The world doesn't see it, even though you have these internal distinctions. So it just shows that you need to be even more rigorous about doing it internally. That was one of the important takeaways. But I think across the board, just seeing how much well, first of all, how different the different media types are and how different the types of people who go and do that work is. I think it's sometimes this gets simplified down to, okay, like we're engineers and then there are people who are journalists who do content. It's obviously a lot more nuanced than that. I think if you're operating at that level of simplicity, you're like actually probably really missing the point, because like the stuff that is that's going to be important in the different types of journalism are actually just extremely nuanced, and getting a chance to see all that in one day was really valuable, and it did shape a lot of the discussions that our team had, and it helped crystallize a lot of the points that you've been driving home for me over the years.
Yeah. And obviously the dynamic debate that we've been having, it has been mostly focused on paying a premium for preeminent content. When you look at the ad market, there's the Facebook ad market, and then there's the open ad market, which some people would argue is not particularly open. Are you seeing changes there that, apart from people paying for the content, that other core element of revenue that historically has funded news organisations' advertising, that has reached an inflection point, or could reach an inflection point in a way, whether it be a local paper or a national paper or an international website, that there's more of a chance of more of the money going to news sites?
Yeah, so I think the basic ingredients in the formula of what we're trying to do with the News tab are these two ways of doing monetization that you're highlighting. So one is by making it so that the content in the News tab is it's not that a person is saying, I want to follow the New York Times, or I want to follow Fox News, and then they get content from that. It's basically we're having a team of people who is choosing which content to show, which creates a relationship and a dynamic where we have a reason to go out and pay for that content, to go get it into the systems, that way we can choose to show it, rather than just having it be, okay, I'm following one of these organizations, and I'll get to see whatever that publisher is saying. So that covers the paying for premium content piece. But the other piece, as you say, is making it so that the news organizations can run their own ads and can get all the money from that. And of course, we want there to be multiple options. So you can run your own ads and get 100% of the revenue, or you can use our ad network, which we have obviously a lot of engineers and people working on trying to build really advanced technology for this, and there we give the vast majority of the revenue to the publishers, and in order to make that work. So I think that over time we're going to need both. I don't think that the sustainable business model around news has ever been only one or the other for most players. So I think we'll need to continue working on both. But I think what we've really unlocked here is a business model where it makes sense for both parties for us to be paying for premium content, and that just adds a whole new element on top of the advertising type work that we've been doing in the past. I'm curious from your perspective. You've in your career you've worked. You grew up as a journalist, did a lot on the editorial side, and now obviously are more on the publisher side and kind of running the whole business.
It's easier to spend money than make money, I've discovered.
What's that?
It's easier to spend money as an editor than it is to make money as a chief executive, except for you, but at least in my case.
Well, I don't know. I think my CFO might disagree with that, but it's if you look at how much we invest in kind of future technology stuff. But so I'm curious from your perspective. What do you see as the trends there? I mean, you asked me about whether it's local or advertising versus advertising premium kind of pay for content mix. What are I guess the trends that you think are most promising? What do you think we need to get to in order for this to be a really good long-term sustainable model for the overall industry?
Yeah, look, I started as a copy boy because I couldn't get a job as a cadet journalist. And it's interesting, my first job was to put together two types of sandwiches. One was to go out and buy sandwiches for the real reporters. And the other was to put carbon paper between copy paper so that the real reporters could write stories. They were called sandwiches. And then a year into my career, I went on strike with all other Australian journalists because of the introduction of computer terminals, which are essentially word processors. That was my first experience, my first disintermediating experience with new technology. But
it's stuck with you.
It's stuck. I don't bear a grudge. That was literally 1980. But I think, look, one of the what was really reinforced at the Melbourne Herald, which is where I started, well, two things. One thing that was really enforced, which I think for all the media managers in this room should be an important issue, particularly at this time. I mean, to say I was naive at 17 is a euphemism. And I working environment that really helped me as a person develop a sense of place, a sense of profession, a sense of identity even. And even though media, I mean, the cut and thrust, the competition is relentless, as it should be. But it's incumbent on every media manager to create an environment where if we're talking about the future of journalism, where young journalists get to realise their personal potential. And I think it's become obvious that too many newsrooms were not that. And that's totally unacceptable, because I was the beneficiary of the kindness of many women and men in that environment. And if individuals are not confident, then they won't have the ability to take advantage of the professional opportunity. We need as many great professionals as we can muster in the journalistic community. The other thing that's crucial for journalism, and what was emphasised even in those early days at the Herald, was precision and accuracy, names, dates, places, prices, whatever. You had to get every detail absolutely right. And that accuracy imperative was amplified in the writing and editing. You are taught to let the facts fashion a theme, and not to handpick a theme and then choose selective facts to prove a point. And now, look, we're all fallible, but as a reporter, to have the objective of being objective, not the objective of being subjective, is imperative. Opinion journalists, as we talked about before, are obviously meant to have strong, eloquent opinions. And there are two forms of church and state in journalism, that between news and opinion, that between the editorial department and the commercial department. In that sense, journalism is rather multi-denominational. Now, I've crossed the revenue Rubicon. I'm sometimes tempted to go back, but
it's tough.
It's tough. But I do think that we are at a crucial moment in the evolution of so many newspapers. Costs are being cut at so many papers in so many places, and they're getting to the point, particularly in local papers, where even if they were to go entirely digital and cut more costs, because you don't have the distribution, you don't have the newsprint, that the quality of the journalism would be so low that no one in their right mind would pay for it. And we have to turn this inflection point into a pivot point. Now, it's partly incumbent on us in the industry, but I think that you and other digital companies can genuinely play a role, because we can see, no matter how clever Quartz might be, it's on life support. And that's, the former editor was an ex-Wall Street Journal digital specialist, extremely clever guy. He was unencumbered by tradition. He was contemporary in his thinking. And that sort of existential debate is going on in so many places. So we have to move pretty quickly. Frankly, I think you have to move as quickly as you can on local papers. Local papers themselves have to come and seek Mark and his team out and make the case in their community that they're the paper that should receive payment for quality content, because you can change that equation just a little bit. You move from an industry that's in decline, and in some cities, in some locales, is in terminal decline, to an industry that can actually see a future. And that shift from pessimism to optimism, I think, is genuinely a defining moment in our society.
Yeah. I think it's probably worth mentioning, we do already work with about 6,000 local papers. So we certainly want to do more, but that's this, I think, is the next frontier, as you're saying. It's in some ways it's easier to go work out partnerships and a business model with with the top 200 publishers in the country or around the world, but figuring out how to go work with a lot of the local ones is going to end up being really critical around the world, not just in this country. Yeah. I'm curious to get a sense of. So I think through this conversation we've kind of played back some of the conversations we've had over the last few years. I'd be curious to give everyone here a sense of what you plan on pushing us on for the next few years, I'm actually, I guess I'm personally interested in hearing this as well.
There goes my negotiating position.
Yeah, well, I'll use this interview for what I can.
Yeah, look, it is. For us as a company, obviously, it's Australia, it's the UK. So in a self-interested perspective, that is going to be a crucial moment for us to continue consistently the theme, the pattern that you've so wisely set here. I do think around understanding algorithms and algorithmic transparency is a crucial issue, and not just for Facebook, but more generally, because when you look in the advertising market, algorithms, metrics were meant to bring transparency, but in the so-called open market, what we have is opacity. And so ensuring that as you develop algorithms, just explaining, because I think some of the quite candidly, some of the discussion our teams have had is when a change has been made and we see it in our metrics, and we'll ring someone and say, hey, you've obviously done something because we can see it in our metrics. And I think to use the relationships that you're now building with, you already have relationships, but your relationships with news organisations will be strengthened by these partnerships. And to use that as an opportunity to get feedback so that actually your team can anticipate a little more cogently the intended and also the unintended consequences of algorithmic change.
Yeah, I think that's certainly, I think we can do a better job of working with partners to have more transparency and also lead time about what we see in the pipeline, so that way it's I think stability is a big theme, right? It's a lot of the experiments and things that we've tried to do over the last few years, even when they might have been good things to try, if it kind of just causes a spike, then it's really hard for all of your businesses to plan for that and make long-term investments. So I think just giving as much of a view into that as possible. And I guess from my perspective too, the work around AI and algorithms is probably one of the least understood parts of what we do. And I think there's probably, I think we have a big responsibility to make sure that we communicate this clearly. And I also think a lot of your organizations will need to look into this and make sure that that you communicate to the world very clearly about what's going on. But I think today, this is probably one of the least understood parts of what we do. I'll routinely see people say, oh, well, of course these sites or these services are optimizing for content, whatever is going to make it so that people spend the most time on these services. And that's actually not true. For many years now, I've basically prohibited any of our feed teams, either the Instagram feed or news feed in Facebook, from optimizing the systems to encourage the maximum amount of time to be spent. What we do is we actually optimize the systems for facilitating as many meaningful interactions between people as possible. And what we basically do is we have people come in and we show them all the content that we could have showed them. And we ask them, hey, which things would you have wanted to see? And which things of what you did see actually led to a real conversation between you and someone else? And then we try to take that firsthand data and kind of map it to other signals that we're seeing in the product and build an algorithm and a system that is going to lead to facilitating as many meaningful interactions across our services as possible. But this is a very kind of misunderstood thing that we do. We actually made a very big adjustment last year. I think this was in maybe the first or second quarter of the year, and where we made an adjustment to turn a bunch of to tune a lot of the ranking a lot further towards emphasizing friends and family content, highlighting meaningful interactions. The result of that change was to remove about 50 million hours of viral video watching a day from our services. So time spent on the services went way down. It wasn't a thing that we really had much of a sense of beforehand. Of course, then we went to go report our earnings the next quarter, and that was a bad quarter. Our market cap dropped by $100 billion in a day. It was the biggest drop in market cap in American business history. So that's among the dubious distinctions that we get to have as a company. We get that one as well. And just to put this in perspective, I think that drop in market cap on that day was 2/3 of the total stock market drop on Black Tuesday before the Great Depression, normalized for today's dollars. So not just that dollars were a lot less back then. So this is like a really big shift. And yet I still kind of see this narrative that we must just optimize for time spent. And it's not true, which I think means that we need to do a better job of making sure that people understand what we're actually doing, what what are the values that we're trying to optimize for, what guides these decisions, how these systems work, so that way there can just be more transparency and kind of and that the content that people see about that can be accurate.
Just before we take questions, I would agree with that very much so. And the algorithm can't be an excuse, which we find not with you, but with some companies. And there has to be a blending of artificial intelligence and emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Now, can we have some emotionally intelligent questions?
Yeah, let's take some questions from the room. All right, Campbell, are you gonna?
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm gonna leave it tomorrow.
All right, go for it.
I think we have reporters here. You, maybe.
Hey, Mark. Peter Kafka from Recode. You say it's important to support journalistic organizations. You're paying News Corp and other publishers that are participating, but not all the publishers that are participating in the News tab. Why not pay license fees to all the participating publishers?
So what we're doing, at least to start, is a lot of publishers are getting a lot of value from putting their stuff on Facebook already. But then there's a set of publishers who only are publishing a small subset of their content. So there are basically two things that these financial deals are based on. One is we want to make sure that in the News tab we have as wide of a breadth of content as possible, especially for the personalization part of things. So if someone's interested in cooking, we want to make sure that we get the great New York Times cooking content, right? So or whoever else is making that kind of great content as well. So we don't just want to make sure that we have a broader set of content beyond just what's already posted on Facebook. So that's one thing, is an API feed of that content. The other area is there are, of course, a number of publishers whose business models are based on paywalls. And in order to make it so that some of the content can be visible to people on Facebook and that can actually be useful to people who go to this tab, we've had to structure specific relationships so that way some of the content can be visible from behind the paywall. So those are the main things that the relationships are based on today. We're going to need to keep on working on this. The goal over time is to cover a wider set of publishers. Probably the next set of kind of emphases is going to be local, as we talked about, and of course international. Right now we're launching this in the U.S. To start now, but we want to do something like this across the rest of the world as well. So we've already begun working on a lot of those discussions and partnerships and what those can look like. And there are different laws and different kind of structures of the industry in different places around the world. So it'll have to vary a little bit, but I'm optimistic about doing that. But over time, the goal certainly is to cover as wide of a range as possible.
Hi, thanks. Claire Atkinson with NBC News. I wondered if you could drill down a bit more on the economics. How are you deciding what to pay the different media companies? Is it based on clicks? Is it just one big guaranteed payment? And then second question, how are you harvesting any data behind what people read and sharing that with the partners or with advertisers?
Sure. So it's not any kind of one metric, but in general, we value things like the amount of content that people are producing, that that is high quality. The scale of the number of people who who are basically subscribers or readers of that content or viewers of that content. And then, of course, how much the different relationships, how much we're paying depends on the two things that I just said before in terms of what we're actually paying for, the API feed of all the content. Some publishers are already, basically, there's a lot of the content that they're not putting on Facebook, so there's more that we would need to do. Some who have a paywall model, we obviously need to make sure that the economics work for them and that they don't disrupt that business model. So those are basically the factors that go into this. It's not a kind of exact formula. Maybe we'll get to that over time, but it's all within a band based on kind of what you'd expect given those different factors. On data, we don't give data to advertisers, so that's not changing here. That's probably one of the other very persistent myths about our company is people have the sense that somehow we're selling data, and that's just never really been a thing that we do. That's never been our business model. So that's not the goal. We of course want to make it so that when a publisher has someone who is a subscriber and who's paying and has a relationship with that publisher, that we can help facilitate them understanding what the activity of those folks would be across our services as well, as long as a person connects their accounts and logs in. So there's work that we need to do to enable that, which I think could be quite valuable for publishers. We want to make sure that people have that news organizations have an understanding of what their subscribers are reading and watching across all the different platforms. I think that there's an opportunity to do that. There are obviously some restrictions on how to do that, but that's an area that we're excited about working on as well.
Certainly on data, our impression is that we will have more data about our readers coming from Facebook with that new news tab, because someone will click on a headline and basically they're going to come to the Wall Street Journal. So we will know who that person is, will be in a permissioned way, and that will be the same for all other media companies who are participating.
Yes.
Hi, Sarah Fisher from Axios. Do you have any thoughts about how your curators are going to curate news about Facebook itself? And I ask because there's some outlets like Bloomberg that doesn't like Bloomberg to cover Bloomberg.
So I didn't get the last comment about Bloomberg covering Bloomberg, but I can probably answer the question anyway.
Bloomberg doesn't cover Bloomberg.
Oh, is that a policy?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Apparently.
I didn't know that was a thing a person could do. All right, but
apparently
that won't be our policy.
Nothing ever happens.
It's like, unfortunately, our policies were set before this moment.
You can't go back.
No,
now.
I don't think that's the right. I don't think that's the right approach. No. Look, the team is going to be independent. For better or worse, we're a prominent part of a lot of the news cycles. I don't think that it would be reasonable to try to have a news tab that didn't cover the stuff that Facebook is doing. And in order to make this a trusted source over time, they have to cover it objectively. Now, they're not going to be writing the pieces. They're going to be basically curating the pieces that other people are writing. So so the team will get the choice of the different content that people are putting out there, and whatever the kind of the big story of the day is. A lot of the job of the journalism and curation team will be figuring out, okay, well, which journalists wrote the definitive piece, who uncovered the facts here, and that's, I think, what they're going to be based on. But look, I think we're quite aware that in order for this product to have credibility and be trusted, this needs to be very independent. So, so joking aside about whatever Bloomberg does, I think that we need to make sure that this team has kind of free reign to make sure that they can include content about Facebook or me or kind of anything else that's related to that.
And nothing has ever happened to Bloomberg, and nothing will ever happen to Bloomberg. So there's nothing to see there.
All right, I think we have time for one or two more.
Thanks. Hi, Margaret Sullivan with The Washington Post. So Facebook has been under fire recently for not insisting on truthfulness or even decency in political advertising and related content. How will issues of accuracy and quality be settled in what makes it into the news tab, and how will you keep from the refs being worked, as I think has happened in the past when politically active groups have come after Facebook, very strongly and said, we want our point of view represented, and it's made a difference.
All right. Well, leaving aside the judgment on kind of other areas of the product, I have a lot that I could say there, but that's maybe not today's topic. I mean, look, this is a different kind of thing. Most of the rest of what we operate on is helping give people a voice broadly and making sure that everyone can share their opinion. That's not this, right? This is a space that is dedicated to high quality and curated news. There are very strict guidelines on what it takes to be a publisher that's going to be included in here. We have to have objective standards because you can bet there are going to be questions that different folks have about why they get to be included or not in this, and making sure that that the content is in there, that the standards are clear and objective, and part of the standards are that the content needs to be able to be fact-checked and not have misinformation, right? I mean, that's an important part of the standard here. I think that this is a different. People have a different expectation in a space about dedicated, high-quality news than they do in a space where the goal is to make sure that everyone can have a voice and can share their opinion and can tell their story in whatever the way that kind of feels authentic and reasonable to them.
We have time for one more.
All right.
Hi, Mark Tracy from the New York Times. On that, one of the, I think, non-paid publishers that's been getting some attention is Breitbart. A few years ago, the Breitbart chairman called it a platform for the alt-right, so I'm not sure there's that much dispute about kind of some of what they do. Given kind of all of what you just said, how this is kind of a curated experience, what does adding Breitbart as one of the publishers, what do you hope that will add to the experience?
Well, all right. I don't think it... I don't know if I'm going to speak to any specific firm in there, but look, I mean, the standards are transparent, like I just said. I do think that part of having this be a trusted source is that it needs to have a diversity of basically views in there. So I think you want to have content that kind of represents different perspectives, but is doing so in a way that complies with the standards that we have for this. Having someone be possible or eligible to show up is going to be different from what the curators and the journalists who are picking the top stories necessarily choose is the most relevant thing to surface. So I think we're going to have to see a little bit how this plays out. But I certainly think you want to include a breadth of content in there to make sure that all the different topics can be covered.
And I would just say, as a general point, when we're dealing with hypotheticals, and it's the same with every media organisation, particularly at this time of polarisation and provocation, that we really need calm heads, clear heads, not exploding heads.
All right. Well, that sounds like a good moment to end on.